Hello, my name is Aaron Cavanagh and I'm the founder and editor-in-chief of Post-Burnout.com. Post-Burnout.com is a culture website dedicated to venerating burnt-out artists the world over. This is our website's podcast where we publish full-length recordings of our interviews, which are sometimes the unedited versions of our site's articles and at other times are exclusives. If you're a returning listener, thank you for coming back, and if this is your first time listening, thank you for checking us out. We hope you enjoy and consider subscribing, giving the episodes a thumbs up if you're on YouTube, or giving it a rating if you're anywhere else. It really helps us out. Thank you. Alright, in this edition of Post-Burnout.com interviews guitarist Jonny Woods and drummer James Foy of the Belfast sexy sophistipop band Wynona Bleach discuss their upcoming second album, their new sound, their recent lineup change, performing at this year's South by Southwest, going unexpectedly viral in Russia and touring the country in 2017, signing with the legendary indie label Fierce Panda Records, and much more. Hey Johnny, can you hear me okay?
I can. Can you hear me okay?
Very perfectly fine. It's nice to meet you.
Now, you too. I am so sorry about the other day, by the way.
Don't even worry about it. These things happen.
Oh, Jesus Christ. I mean, if I can give you any excuse, Michael sent me. I was like dying of a flu over the weekend, right? And Michael started hitting me with like information, loads, and I was lying in bed in a coma. And then he goes, and also you've got this on, and I was like, great, yeah, no problem, that sounds good, no worries. I was like as chipper as I could be, and then he sent me a voice clip of all of the times, and then I just sort of played it, and then fell asleep and forgot, and then like I knew it was coming up, but I thought it was tomorrow. Oh, today I thought it was Wednesday, but I didn't put it in my calendar, and I always put shit in my calendar, so I
That's fine. Don't worry
totally
about
fucked it
it.
up. So it's my
We're
fault.
all.
I'm
It's all
sorry.
good. We all. No, I can't throw stones from my dad's house.
Fair enough.
It's
Fair
nice to
dues.
meet you, Johnny. Yeah.
Yes, you
Anyway,
too.
yeah. Um, I guess there's like a lot to kind of begin with the band. I don't even really know where to start. The band isn't even like a decade old, and I mean, already you've had such like a very storied career. I think you'd agree. Um,
Yeah.
does it feel like it's been around the songs it has, or does it feel like longer, or does it feel shorter? I mean, like just in terms of the length of the band, how long it's been.
I feel like we were robbed of 2 years with COVID anyway, so
Mhm.
it sort of feels, yeah, always weird. It's funny you mention that because, when you're filling out, when you release a new song and you're like putting together a press release and you're filling out sort of forms and you're doing stuff, and you have to put in the date that the band was formed, and I
Yeah,
keep looking at 2018, thinking, oh, that was only, a
yeah.
couple of years ago. It's only 2018, but then you realize, Jesus Christ, that is actually a long time ago. So.
Hmm.
I don't know. I mean, we've done. I don't think we've done enough in that time. So yeah, I guess like it's felt like a very short time, and it
Yeah.
still feels like we have a huge mountain to climb ahead of us. So
No, it's interesting. I mean, obviously looking from a third person perspective, because I look at the band and, to be fair, I mean, I guess like a lot of press releases and stuff I'll be reading are kind of like the highlights, like
mm,
no one really kind of no one really like dedicates a lot of space to be like, and here's the time our car broke down, or
yeah,
here's the time the promoter kind of shafted us or whatever. Although,
yeah,
unless you're reading like Get in the Van or something, but
yeah,
but like it's interesting even just like the passage of time just in the short um just a short lifespan of the band, because like one of the first things, I mean, if I'm getting this correct, under the name or 51, you guys were performing in Russia. That's actually how you kind of began, was well, you're from Belfast, right? Or
mhm,
so you were performing in Russia. I want to ask a little bit about how that came about, but even now, I mean, like, given everything that's happened over the last couple of years, I mean, that doesn't even seem like an avenue of possibility anymore to even
yeah.
perform in Russia for like new bands. Yeah, I mean, do you think it's even like just weird in terms of like how politics and the world around you kind of affects the possibilities of the band?
Yeah, I mean, it's disappointing really more than anything because it's sort of stolen that thing that we had, like we how that really came about was just that a promoter asked us, and at the time we couldn't have really got arrested here, and we were just this young band trying to figure out who we were, and we were doing any gig we could get, and this promoter came to us and said, we I think I could sell you over here, and he said, your music already exists on, they have a thing over there called VK, which is
Yeah.
kind of their Facebook, but it's
Hmm.
like a wild west. There's no regulation on it, and so any
Yeah, yeah.
music, any video, you can watch any movie on it. It's like completely open. And somebody had already uploaded us to that, like an EP that we had done, and he'd found us there, and he said, "Look, I think I could give you some gigs if you're up for it. Here's how much I think it'll end up costing you, and here's how much I think I can make you back." And
Hmm.
it was kind of breaking even on it, and we asked, what's the story with visas and whatever, and he said, the Russian government don't give a shit about musicians. They don't think you're going to make any money anyway. So come on ahead. So yeah, we just went and did that. And I think what happened was I have this great mentor. His name's Dave Sinton, and he used to manage bands throughout the late 80s and 90s. And he had a real big success with some bands that he had done some great work with.
I
And
recognize the name.
yeah, I'm inspired. He's an inspiring guy, and he's always been like a really close best friend of mine. And he was the guy that went, well, just do it. Why would you not? Like,
Yeah.
what have you got to lose? So he always told me about post tour blues, and by that stage we'd never really done a real tour, and so we went off and did this tour, and it was amazing. And we were there. I think it was, I can't remember if it was 12 shows, but there was no days off. So we were
Hmm.
just every single night. It was like 8 hours to the next city, another show. Met some amazing people who were wonderful and not in any way politically, dodgy. They were all like playing anywhere. They were lovely, friendly, nice people that felt like they were alternative kids. There was a lot of LGBT kids that I think saw us and thought we'd be really like open to them, and obviously we were. So we kind of made this space for them in some way that we didn't know
That would be a dick move if you're like, ooh. No, I
yeah,
don't.
exactly. But it was great because we had a really good time with them all, and ended up in parties after every show, and all sorts of great stuff. And then of course as soon as I get back home, the post tour blues hit, and I changed the band name.
Yeah.
So technically Wynona Bleach formed, but the real reason for that on top of that was that we had a different bass player just before that tour, and then he left like a month before the tour because he got a job in the US. And Carl
Mhm.
auditioned, and he was amazing, and we became best friends, and we just went, this is now a new band. Carl is here, he's arrived, let's make it a new name. So we changed the name, and up until that point we couldn't get arrested, but then all of a sudden as soon as we changed our name, because it was a slightly better name, people started to care, I guess, and we had a management deal, and all sorts of things happened around that. So it was, yeah, Russia was like cutting our teeth, and we came back like 10 times the band we were,
Yeah.
and learned how to be together and play together and how to make a band work. So I think that's whenever I record bands, in my studio, and they ask me advice on like anything, I'm like, I don't have advice, but the only thing I can say is do loads of gigs and do a tour. If you go away with your friends for 10 days and come back, you will be a better band all day.
It's an interesting question I have based on kind of what you were saying there. I mean, how much of the kind of the success of the band has been, do you think, kind of deliberate choices that you've made, and how much of it's just been kind of like random dumb luck? Because I mean, obviously, something like VK,
Mhm.
getting uploaded there, I mean, it's something that it's just like something you wouldn't even really think of. It's like just an avenue that I think definitely Westerners wouldn't. I mean, like I know VK outside of Russia is also very popular in Eastern Europe as well.
Mhm.
So I was wondering, like, how much of like kind of the success of the band and the kind of opportunities you've had have been kind of like deliberately putting your foot in the door, and how much of it's just been kind of like, oh, this opportunity kind of
Yeah.
arose.
Honestly, I would say like you can put your foot in every door, and you have to try really hard and do loads of things, but it never goes the way you think, or the most usually the best stuff is the unexpected stuff, like that VK thing. And when we got our record deal with Fierce Panda, that was a similar thing. Most things that have happened for us, we have thought would go one way, and we have planned, and we have tried, and we have badgered and fought and done what we did. And then, by the end of that process, something entirely different has occurred, and it was usually for the better.
Yeah.
I can't say we're like anywhere near where we should be yet. We still have a long road ahead, but any small wins have all been the best wins. Of those small wins have been the ones we didn't expect, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you just kind of briefly touched on there the first Panda deal. I mean, my understanding, if I'm getting the chronology correct, is that you went to Portugal and recorded the album Moonsoak, and then there was interest in the album, and First Panda was you felt was the best kind of like the best label for you and for your band. Yeah, I mean, it's a great label. I mean, like real historic label, indie label. Was that kind of also an important thing too, just in terms of like going on an independent label versus like a major, or what was your kind of relation with that?
Well, What really happened was we had a little bit of interest from other labels at the time, but Panda, Simon in particular, had come to a lot of our shows in London before that. And I guess he didn't realize we were trying to court him a bit
Mm-hmm.
because, well, I mean, obviously he must have known, but he didn't quite twig that we really wanted to be on Fierce Panda because what actually, okay, the fine detail of what happened was it was a kind of pincer move. We had a lot of different people that we were friends with at the time. We still are, but one of them passed away. Was a great rock and roll agent called Steve Strange, who was kind of one of the bigger agents for the likes of. I think he was Eminem's first UK agent. He was also Snow Patrol and he's Foo Fighters and everybody. Sadly, he passed away 2 years ago, but he was a really great help with our band's formation, and like it was a really like as soon as anybody found out we were involved with him or friends with him, we had people interested in wanting to talk to us. So he was the first person that caused Panda and some other labels to be interested in us. And then we hadn't got a record yet. And originally we were obviously trying to shop around the whatever we had to go, any chance we could get some money, and obviously nobody was going to give us any money. So we decided we got pissed off with that, and we went, well, fuck this, we're going to make a record anyway. So we went to the Portuguese thing is a whole other story, but after we had completed the album, my day job is recording bands, and I didn't want to mix it because it felt like I had been too close to it this whole process. So after we had Bill Ryder Jones over there with us and work on that record, my big mission was to find somebody to mix it that I thought would be better than me. And I ended up in an awards ceremony. I was smuggled in by our manager into the MPG Awards just I think 2 months before COVID hit, so like 2020, started 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And I got in there and I became friends with these two record producers called Andy Bradfield and Avril McIntosh. And
Yeah.
so we had those two who were batting for us. We had Steve Strange batting for us, and then we had all these different people batting for us. And actually, what ended up happening was Simon at Fierce Panda thought, all right, well, they've got a big deal with a big label now. They won't need me because they've got all these friends who work for big labels. But all along, we were like, kind of just want Panda to take it on because they had their great reputation. And we had a bit of an ick with a couple of A&R people that were from bigger labels. And it felt like emails would go unnoticed until we did something on our socials, and then the emails would be replied to, and it just gave us
Yeah.
bad vibes. We were like, we didn't want to be halfway through an album or releasing an album and somebody just give up or not give a fuck and not put any effort in. So it was at that stage that I was like, Simon seemed to turn up. He came to every gig in London, and he always hung out with us, and we had beers with him and chatted to him. And even though they probably had way less money or no money, it was at least somebody with a good reputation that we're good friends with. So what ended up happening was our manager was at a party and Simon was there, and he said, so what's happening with their record? I suppose they've got it signed off and all. And she was like, no, why don't you sign them up? And then he went, I've been wanting to for all along, but I just thought that they were signed to someone else at this point because of all the other people involved with it. And so we ended up giving them that record. But of course, by that stage we had already taken pre-orders, and I think we'd already done the first pressing on our own. So Panda ended up buying half the records physically off us and relabeling them. So I
Yeah.
think on the first pressing of the first record, half of those are Panda Fierce Panda stickered over ones, and then the other half are pressing. Then they did subsequent presses since, but it's just so funny, like the idea of like getting signed to a label, but they had to buy the fucking records off us like physically because we'd already done it. I think COVID scuppered it all because we had 2 years of nothing. It was kind of
Yeah.
that way too. So weird time, weird time. It felt like I lost a year and a half, but we gained a record deal out of it. So yeah,
I
sort of
can't wait
swings and roundabouts.
in 20 years to see them on like Discogs. It's like, yeah, I have the original 500 press.
Yeah, I've got the 150 that are his. Yeah, fucking me. I think it was a first press of 400, so 200 of them would have been his Simon's Fierce Panda labels. And of course, even because I'm a dick, I said, "So who's gonna do it?" And he's like, "Oh, we'll just get someone in the office to do it." And I was like, "What's it gonna look like?" And he sent me a picture, and it was just this white square of like the Panda logo over the old one. I was like,
Yeah.
"Simon, I'll sort it out." So I ended up we did the labeling for him because I wanted it to look better. So yeah, it was fun. Like, but they're good people, and then they got bought over by a larger company now, so they've got a little bit more clout in the world, and hence why we've so far stayed with them. So
That's an
Yeah.
interesting thing too. I mean, like you know, when you sign with a label, you don't know what kind of like publishing deals they're gonna make like later on down the line. I mean, was that always something that was like in consideration when having like I guess like because obviously I think any artist wants autonomy over their work and not just the creative autonomy, but also just like you know ownership of the work. And I know it's like one thing I'm noticing a lot lately is if you actually look at the kind of details of a contract between an artist and the label, a lot of them are just licensing
Mhm.
their music to a label and then they'll retain the rights after a certain amount of time. You know, I mean, all this kind of like music industry part, like the actual industry side of things, was that something that you were familiar with prior to signing, or was it something that you were reading about, or like just in general? Because I think like you know we often hear people who get like really shafted in their first deal and stuff like that. Was
Mhm.
that like what were the kind of I guess precautions in that regard?
I definitely learned while it was happening how it all worked. But I was lucky because as well as having good friends and great mentors like the one I mentioned before, Dave,
Mhm.
who gave me great advice. I learned a lot during that process before we signed the line. But honestly, I didn't have to learn so much. We got lucky because Fierce Panda are so generous to their artists in the sense that our deal is essentially a license. So we license them. We have to make the recordings, obviously, but we then license it back to them or license it to them so that we retain ownership of it and we get the final say on where things end up. So they even, I think, even in their contract, they still have to have us approve. They can sync it anywhere and they can put it anywhere they like, but we still retain publishing and everything. So we still get control over it all. And what they gain is really 50% of all the sales. So it's just like a 50-50 deal, which is really a lot of what a lot of indie labels should do,
Yeah,
especially when they don't have a big cash reserve to drop on something. And if they're, and even some labels like I've seen some deals that bands that I've worked with in my production job. I've seen them receive like really weird deals but they're made to feel like they're special because maybe the deal is being given like 3 grand or some really small amount of money, but that is more than they've ever seen anybody give them. So then they've given up their publishing for it, or they've given up a
yeah,
shit. Weird things exist by weird small labels that have a little bit of money but not a lot. But Panda at the time really didn't have very much at all, and they were riding on their reputation at that point. They're subsequently being bought over. They've got some background now, and they've got a bit more clout in that department. But yeah, I had to learn on the fly, I think, but I learned from good people, and I was sort of lucky with that. And that's part of it, like being around good people and having that good team that they all say you're supposed to have. That was what was important to me, like having a team and,
yeah.
and if I hadn't had them, I was sort of still lucky because it was Panda. But had it have been that other couple of labels that we were dealing with, I probably would have got pretty badly fucked over, and we probably wouldn't even be talking right now. Who knows?
Yeah, probably. I have to ask actually because you were kind of talking there a little bit about initially it was going to be self-release your debut album.
Mhm.
So excuse me, sorry. So was that like I guess like what kind of dissuaded you from going down that route? Because I think that's kind of like the popular route now. Everyone seems to be kind of self-releasing it. I think there's this idea, I guess, of like it's sort of democratizing music somewhat, where you don't need a label to get your music kind of
Mhm.
published. But I mean, obviously there are huge advantages to being a label, particularly when it comes to physical releases, because even if you can afford the cost of vinyl, the backlog is insane.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, vinyl is sort of at least for the moment, and, you know, these things can change, but for the moment, it seems to be the kind of in vogue sort of physical medium. I've seen a resurgence lately in tapes and not so much in CD, but I think like you know, I think like more kind of what would you call it, kind of easier to transport
Yeah.
means for like just for like a merch table thing.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, I mean, like if you had gone down the self-releasing path, I mean, how do you find that the band would have been kind of different?
Well, I mean, the main reason for me to be part of Fierce Panda in our case, but in any kind of why we were seeking a deal, it wasn't really from a financial point because we didn't think anybody with any money would give us any of it, right?
Sure.
I think the main reason why we wanted to be part of a label was to be part of like a new community, or to be like part of a new. I mean, as awful as it sounds, I think a lot of the time when you're at least part of something like that, you're kind the filter that you've got to go through to get things is a little bit easier, because when you like say you're trying to get, I don't know, a showcase at a big showcasing event, being part of a label makes that a lot easier, because they might run a showcase stage like we've done South by before. We're doing it again, mainly because we're playing the Fierce Panda stage.
Hmm.
Those things make it a whole lot easier to get your name around and get in front of people, and that's the big benefit of it for me. It's like being part of the community that Panda have, and we get to play Pandemonium and be friends with other bands on that label, and we share gigs, and we trade shows between Belfast and London or wherever
Yeah.
anybody wants to do. I think it was that. It's like, because we weren't standing to lose a whole lot of ownership in their case, it made sense. Had we self-released, it would have felt a bit like a drop in the ocean that way. I think,
Sure.
I don't know really, even with some radio DJ and like a lot of people that we, try to target for playlisting and all, I think when they see that it's coming from Panda, it's a little bit less drop in the ocean. It's not just like a random band hitting them out of nowhere. At least when the random band comes at them and there's a little bit of reputation behind them that are going, yeah, they're good. We promise. That helps us, and that I think's the big benefit. I don't think it necessarily changes bands' lives in any other massive way, especially on an indie label. But like,
Hmm.
and with the likes of vinyl, like I reckon for me, I've seen it research. I remember a time when I was absolutely starting out and I was 13, 14, picking up guitar for the first time, playing in bands and going, there's no way I'll ever be on a vinyl record, because, that's dead and nobody's ever going to do it again. And now seeing how massively successful selling records is, because I've done it and I've been in
Yeah.
I've been on the merch table and seen more people buy our record than t-shirts. I treat it like a t-shirt. I don't really treat it like a format. I mean, I have a lot of vinyl, and I buy it mostly to own a big thing that I can look at from that band. And
Hmm.
listening to it is kind of 60% of the ownership of it. It's not all of it and it's not none of it. It's kind of, I know lots of people will buy it and never listen to it. And I would dare say even probably half the people that buy them, but they maybe already have the t-shirt. They maybe already have this and that, and it's a new, big, nice, cool thing to look at. And when you consider a CD, yes, it's more transportable. It's also less to look at, and
Yeah.
same with the cassette. So I don't know if vinyl's ever going to really go away now. I think it's proven itself back, and I think it's sticking around in that capacity. I don't see it dropping below where it is. And somebody told me recently it's outsold. What is it? It's now sold as much as it did in 91 or 1990, something like that.
Yeah, probably, yeah. Because
I know
yeah,
CDs
I
were
guess that would
big,
have been.
but
I was just about to say, yeah. I think that
but
transition
at
had
the
already
same
been
time,
happening.
it's kind of shocking how much,
Yeah.
and new plants are opening every day, and yeah, we do gigs, and I'm shocked at how many records go out at the end of the show compared to t-shirts. Sometimes it's just as many, but it's to me they're the same. So yeah, it's a positive thing. I think it's great.
Also, I mean, like, for someone who's making an album, I mean, what I love about vinyl is that you have to kind of, um, well, first of all, I mean, from the listener's perspective, I mean, when you put on a vinyl versus, say, putting something on a streaming service, is that you have to actually kind of like, it's like a meditative experience almost in a way where it's like you're going to sit with this and you're going to like kind of dedicate time to actually listen to at least one side of the record.
Yeah,
Um, and obviously, I mean, because I grew up kind of in the CD era, and like I kind of got into vinyl later, as I was entering adulthood. No, it's probably early in adult at that time actually,
hmm,
when I started buying vinyl. And one thing I really appreciated was how because it used to just be I'd listen to an album straight through, but then when the A side ends, it kind of gives you an appreciation of the track listing a bit more and the kind of sequencing, because you kind of have to. It's almost like twice you have to kind of have a perfect beginning, middle, and end.
yeah.
So as someone obviously like yourself who's like a huge like album fan, how do you find that like in terms of like your own creative output in terms of like sequencing an album, I guess?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's great question, because we're literally doing it right now. When we started working on our second record, which we're nearly finished, right? Like as it stands at this moment, I think there's only a couple more tracks to finish the mix on and it's done. But we definitely thought about, oh, this is going to be side two's opener, and we're going to have this
Yeah.
sound effect to do that, and then we're going to definitely have to end. Well, the track before that's got to be the closer then of side one. And so we were thinking literally about only the vinyl. Like it was like only that experience, just because we wanted to. It was a really good way to give ourselves a grid to work to. Otherwise it was just, you can do whatever you like and it's cool, but having that limitation of, right, we got 40 minutes or we got 28,
Yeah.
whatever, we got to do this the right way. So we were, yeah, it's a massively important thing for me. I mean, I think because I work as a producer and I deal a lot with other bands, I think a lot from a producer standpoint. And so as a songwriter, it's cool to be able to like think, well, okay, let's cut some fat off this one so that we can make this last, or make, this amount of tracks on this side, and also limit ourselves to this amount of tracks in total. All of
Mhm.
that is like, you don't really think about that if you were just primarily releasing for Spotify or CD. You wouldn't consider it. But I was even thinking the other day about this, where I had this very desk I'm sitting at, I had a box of CDs of my own, like what I collected as a teenager, and they were sitting here for ages, and I just finally got over, my illness over the weekend, my cold and flu, and I was like, I'm gonna blast this room and clean it up. And I looked through my CDs and I was like, yeah, if you look at like a lot of your CDs and you think about like the big singles of those records, quite often it's in the middle rather than at the top of the
Yeah.
album, right? And one of the things I was thinking about was, is that, if they were thinking record, if they were thinking vinyl, is that side two, track one, which is quite a thing, like a trope, opening side two with your big single because you got to bring them back in on the listen. And often it's track six, track seven, and all my favorite records. I'm looking through going, geez, yeah, track six, track seven on that CD. I didn't think anything of it. I just thought, well, track seven is usually the big single when I was a kid. But now I'm thinking about it, I wonder if those artists were thinking in terms of the vinyl too,
Yeah.
and that limitation that you get, which I think is cool. I really like it. I think it's a cool way to like start your process if you're talking album.
Yeah. Do you actually find actually when you take out your old CD collection like that? Because I've an old CD collection I accrued again through my teenage years, and I have even older ones. So when I was like an actual little kid, I mainly just bought singles because I didn't really have the
Yeah,
attention span
same.
for a full
Totally
album.
the same. Yeah,
Yeah. And I
yeah,
remember, yeah, like going to like HMV, and they'd have like the little tin, the really tin cases
yeah.
with the singles,
Listen,
and
the box is right here. Hang on. I'm sure there's maybe not. I know the ones you're talking about, the super thin
Yeah,
little
yeah,
singles.
yeah, yeah. And then years later, I remember my friend had a collection of like they did a compilation of them. So they had like all the Nirvana singles in like
Yeah,
one box, and it was like
yeah.
all like really thin. I remember years ago, I think it was Warner Brother Records did I remember buying them in Tower Records in Dublin, where it was like they would take full albums. So they basically get a band's discography, because I remember I had Fate No More's, and they
Mhm.
just had like all their albums, and they came in those really thin cases, and they just stuffed them into like a box.
Yeah,
And I
I
remember they
know.
were really
But it would
cool.
be like a gift box thing. But you know what you mean? It's like,
Yeah,
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 totally.
yeah. I
Um,
love that. It's like it's such a great way, if
I
because
think
like
it's so
back when
cool.
people were
Yeah,
purchasing
absolutely.
music.
And it does fucking sound better.
Yeah,
I like vinyl. I get the joke. I really enjoy listening to records. I love the methodicalness, cleaning it, putting it
yeah,
up. But I mean, Jesus Christ, comparatively, CD is what they have. If you're talking in the digital age, it was a 44-bit, or it was a 44 point whatever, or 48, or a 16-bit file that came out of that fucking computer. And
yeah,
so if you're going to press it on record, that's great. But if you want to hear that file again, you're
yeah.
better just grabbing the CD. And it's funny, like looking through the prices of them as well. Like I bought like a MBV. I remember that my mind being blown here at Loveless, and it was a tenner.
Yeah, that was always the standard price for CDs. I remember like pretty much every record shop you went to, whether you went to like HMV or what, and I think HMV were a little bit pricier. They were like 14, 15, but like
Yeah,
most shops it was like 10 quid for an
yeah.
album, and that was like the standard. It
Yeah,
was
and
true
then
whether
those
you're
CD
dealing in.
singles being £2 or £1 for me,
Yeah,
like I
yeah.
was
I don't
just
even
like,
remember how much they were. I remember literally just like getting like pocket money as like an 8-year old, a 9-year old, and just buying like whatever kind of intrigued me at that time.
yeah, it's exciting time that, because you also had CD-ROM shit on them too sometimes,
Yeah.
and
Oh, yes. Yes. That was so cool. I remember that. Like, because I had a shitty old, I think it was a Windows 98 computer that I got from a cousin, and because he was upgrading. So I remember just like playing that and just being like, you can watch the music video and all this. It's like so
yeah,
cool.
yeah,
Like,
great.
I remember actually too, like, my mind being blown when I put a CD into iTunes, I think, for the first time,
Yeah.
and just like the tracks were
Oh
the
yeah.
sorry, the lyrics were there, and like the album art was like, this is so cool,
I
you
know,
know?
and then, but today it's all taken for granted because Spotify immediately just shows you
Yeah.
everything, and you even get the video when it's like, yeah.
Yeah. I think, but I actually would like to pick your brain a little bit about this, about like
Mhm.
kind of the streaming age, because I think actually Spotify, it's a weird thing. I was sort of talking to artists about it. There've been acts like, say, for example, Neil Young, Joni Mitchell, as well as before he passed away, Steve Albini, who kind of decided to, because they were dissatisfied with the treatment of artists getting kind of like piss poor money for their work, and Spotify was mainly getting money through musicians, but then they were putting all that money back into podcasting instead, and they weren't like they weren't fairly paying artists, and
Mhm.
they're kind of more so focusing on their podcast platform. A lot of them in protest kind of like decided to remove their music. I was wondering, for young artists today, do you think not being on Spotify would be kind of a hindrance to their success?
Yeah. I mean, we could go on a whole couple of hour conversation about the fairness of Spotify and the fairness of all of that. It is like um pretty unbelievable what we get paid from it, obviously, as people
Sure.
know. But I think it now the whole dynamic of music consumption has changed to the point where it's a dramatically different world than it was before, and people expect it now. The precedent has been set that I can listen to anything I want at any time.
Right.
That precedent has been set, and I don't think any band's going to change that precedent by abstaining. And even if everybody did, there will be many people that will just make it available because it can be available.
Yeah.
So I think it's a hindrance. I think if it depends, like it depends on what you want to get out of being a band. If you want to make a stand politically and you want to do your thing, and then right on, do it. But if you want people to listen to you and you want to reach as many people as you can, you're gonna have to be on it, whether you like it or not. I think that's the sad reality of it. And I there's nothing really I could, that's it.
Sure.
That's how it feels to me in the industry, and so we just let it be there. It's a tool to push the content out to people. Content. I wish I hadn't said that, but you know what I mean. That's what it is. Push the
I
product,
hate,
as
yeah,
they used to
that's
say.
just
You
the
know.
kind of word, that's the umbrella term for
Yeah, it's
anything
the
that's
umbrella. And you know
creative.
what? 10, well, 15, maybe 20 years ago, it was product. And
Yeah.
that was the thing that artists didn't want their managers calling their music. Oh, it's not product, it's music. But it's
Hmm.
it's cyclic, and that's how the world is. Um, to pause the conversation for just a minute, you've met our drummer before because he has a project called Muck Savage that I think you
Yeah,
did.
James Foy, yeah, yeah.
James has just arrived here. If you could give me a second to open
Oh,
the door for
absolutely,
him,
yeah.
is that okay? He had hoped to see whenever we wanted to do the interview yesterday, or whenever I had said, well, let's do it on Tuesday, it would have been with the whole band. And of
Yeah.
course, yeah, my fault. If you can give me just 30 seconds to open the
Go
door, is that
ahead, go
okay?
ahead.
Just a second, I'll let him in. Hang
Absolutely.
on. Yes. Yeah.
I was enjoying the
Hello.
liminal space
Hello,
there
what's
for a sec.
crack?
How are you?
Not too bad, man. How's it going?
Actually, I was just about to leave now. Thanks, James. No, I'm joking.
The face of Wynona
Oh,
Bleach is here,
I
don't
see
worry.
I'm interrupting.
So
Uh,
sorry to continue on then. I mean, yeah, the vinyl. Well, we were talking about streaming, and I do legitimately think that like you have to be on it. That is just the way it is, and there's nothing that can be done about that.
yeah.
It's just
Do you have
it.
any preference, like in terms of sonic fidelity, between the streaming services?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've okay. So a lot of our stuff we mix. Well, I work with Andy Bradfield still from the first record, and
Right.
he's really into the Atmos world of things. So he prefers Apple Music. Purely because he can get Atmos streaming immediately, like on demand, and it also works with AirPods, and
Yeah.
it's got that head tracking thing where you can sit in a room and feel like you're listening to Atmos mixes when you're not actually, kind of thing. So yeah, I think I use Spotify because I'm on a family plan. It's grandfathered in from friends upon friends upon friend groups. I've never actually thought about, I'm going to move to Tidal, I'm going to move here. I never did it because Spotify to me is like a quick way to go get a thing to hear, and then I go do it, and then it's like I'm in that ecosystem already. But yeah, I mean, if I could go to Apple Music, I probably would, purely just so that I could do Atmos, but I don't have any Atmos set up and I don't have AirPods,
Okay.
so not going to do it. Plus, I pay
I think
very little on my family plan now on Spotify. I'm stuck. I'm trapped.
I think it'd be very trippy to listen to Atmos while like on edibles. I don't know what my mind
Yeah,
went there, but I
no,
was just thinking of
absolutely.
lying in your
It's
bed, just
trippy
like,
it's trippy anyway. We were, when we were mid tour, we got to dropped in the studio that Andy mixes it in Battery in London,
Mhm.
and he was like, "Do you want to hear one of your tracks in Atmos finally?" Because he's been doing it all along to all of the singles, and I don't really have a way of listening to it. So we went in, and it was fucking awesome. Like, it was actually really great when you're in the right environment and it's done right. Jesus Christ, there's parts in the middle of I Deserve That where there's shit flying everywhere, and
Yeah.
it's really, really fun and exciting, and it changes how you listen to stuff. It's very cool. On the flip side of that, I've been in friends' houses who have Atmos, and they've played one of my songs, and I'm like, this sounds like shit. Because their center speaker's really loud, and
Sure.
they've got their receiver set up for movie mode instead of music mode, and all of a sudden now the back speakers are twice as loud as they need to be, and all this shit. So
Yeah.
it's I don't think that's at the point where it's commercially unified. Like, at least I can deal with two speakers, and most people are going to have two speakers and they're going to hear it with two speakers.
Yeah.
Atmos. So yeah, I've no interest in jumping ship from Spotify right now just for that. So,
But if you had 40 grand, like,
Yeah.
I went in a complete cynic when we went into Battery. I was like, yeah, this is gonna be bollocks. And I was like blown away, like absolutely blown away.
It was shocking.
So cool.
It was shocking. Because I have heard him do Atmos mixes before, and I've been like, yeah, that's pretty good. Because when you're writing it and you're recording it, you're thinking about the space between two speakers, and you're like filling that up, and you're like, you're putting parts in just to put layers to paint that picture. And all of a sudden, when it's spread across 7.1.4, it's like so much more space exists, and that means that all that density that you had goes away. So there's loads of times I've heard Atmos mixes and I went, this is kind of balls, but times are a changing, and he's made it so much better in the last couple of mixes. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Like,
really cool.
You find actually the kind of production work you're doing with the band has influenced your production work with other artists that you're working with?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I think the best thing about working well, at least producing with Wynona Bleach the way that it has been, it's more collaborative than just me producing for a start. But I don't have to have loads of patience. Right. And then it's great because everybody's really on one, and then when I'm working with other artists, like, that's the only thing I have to do differently, is just have patience with some artists. I don't. Some artists I really have to. There's tricks that I've learned with, like, the likes of working with Andy, and how he deals with room mics, and how he does things in terms of an engineering sense. But as a producer sense, yeah, like, when Wynona Bleach have a mad idea, or somebody in the band has a mad idea, and you have to try and figure out how to do it, there's definitely times I've moved into a studio session with other bands and gone, I can do that really quickly and easily now, because I've already kind of done it once with Wynona Bleach. So yes, sort of, but definitely, like, I'd rather just all day record Wynona Bleach than do anything else. For sure.
Actually, James, how do you find let's get a third person perspective. How do you find Johnny's work as a producer, working with him from a production standpoint?
Well, yeah, I mean, even just last night we were working on like new Muck Savage tracks and stuff, and I mean, I love Johnny, and like the way he produces, and like goes so far as to call him like the fifth Beatle of Muck Savage, if you know what I mean, the fifth mucker, because like he's so good at taking an idea, managing expectations as well, telling me that I'm a stupid cunt and I need to be told I'm a stupid cunt, but also, like, if something's good and he's excited about it, he'll be like, go to the ends of the earth to make that happen, Like, I think you're really good at just getting an idea. If someone's like, I want it to sound like this, you're like, oh yeah, of course, I know exactly what you mean, because you're like such an encyclopedic knowledge of like production, but music, and you know what you like, you know what you don't like, but even if you don't like something, you know how to do that,
Yeah.
which is different than just saying like, fuck that, I don't like it, I don't want to know how to do it.
Mm.
I love it. And even with Wynona Bleach, you know, like as Jonny was saying, mad ideas. I mean, any one of us could have mad ideas. Mel's very much like, she'll sit back and then something will pop into her head and she'll say it, and we'll be like, oh fuck yeah, okay, let's try that. A lot of the time with like lyrics and stuff, but also with just like actual, I don't know, ideas, running with it, kind of like succinctly putting it into words that the rest of us are too stupid to say and stuff.
Or the opposite. Sometimes she'll say something and it's so not even like, it doesn't make sense at all, but it does to her. Like when we do vocal sessions, it's like I don't record her for the vocal sessions. We do them with Avril, because Mel will say, she will describe it a certain way, and
I want to sound more broad. And you're like, what?
Okay, you know. But Avril's great at doing that. Her whole life is working as a vocal producer, so she knows how to turn what Mel as a vocalist, because Mel doesn't really play. She can Mel tomorrow could pick a guitar up and play could learn to play guitar in a few days, and does play guitar, and her dad, she's grown up in an environment full of guitars, which is why she doesn't play guitar. Do you know what I mean? So but you know, she's coming at it when she's in the studio with us, and but she's performing with us, she's very much the grounding force of like, not a muso, if you get me, like not a dickhead who just wants to shred guitar or push things. She's very real, you know. She's like the real person. If you get me, I don't know. That's how it feels in that way. Like she's really good at like making it understandable or something,
digestible, but not in like a dumbed down way.
She's just as good at that.
Grounding is the way to put it. Totally.
Like if I come up with like a melody line or a lyric line, she's pretty quick at going like, that's too many syllables, or that's too long, or we cut that down. And she's very good at like making it make sense when she's then able to sing it. And then it's for her mainly. I think that, I don't even think she's thinking about the audience there. I think she's thinking how to digest it, make it sense for her. And then then as a result, people will either get it or not. But she is really good at writing it down and making it square out right for her, and then move on with it, you know.
Yeah, one thing I want to ask, because you were kind of touching on sort of the band dynamics there. Obviously, I mean, Wynona Bleach had like, you know, different collaborators throughout its lifetime, and when you actually look at the song credits for your new song Tangerine, which we'll get to, but it is apparent that it's a very collaborative effort. How do you find like bringing new members in, and kind of how do you find that kind of changes the actual songwriting aspect of Wynona Bleach, and does it then retroactively also change the stuff that's already out when it's performed live?
You know, when we went through the whole process of finding a drummer, because previously, I mean, the band, I've always thought a band should be collaborative, and I never really got like a dictatorship thing, even though a lot of bands, I love a lot of bands who have dictators and are the boss, and that's just that everybody just does what they're told. Like a lot of my favorite bands are that setup. I never really felt right being in that position, because people always make people better no matter what, you know, and or at least make it different in a better way. So whenever when we had our previous lineup, or I guess Wynona Bleach's first lineup, with Aaron and with Maddie in the band, it was still collaborative then, but in sort of different ways. Like different people brought different things. Whereas whenever we were at the position where Aaron had left to just basically pursue things not involved with music, just to find a new chapter of his life, we couldn't replace him, so we just didn't, and we became a 4-piece. But then whenever it was time to find a new drummer, we'd auditioned, like, I don't remember the number, but I think 13 people actually auditioned, but there was 20 odd interviews with people, like, to just sit and talk to them. And the reason why we did the interview stage thing was because I needed to know if somebody was going to be a collaborator. I didn't really want like a drummer to come in and just be, okay, you need me to do that, it's fine, I'll just do this. Oh, send me the thing and I'll learn it and I'll play it. I don't really rate that, because it's like they don't play the same. They play the thing, which is fine. But I don't write drum parts as well as a drummer would, so why should I be the guy that does that, you know? So James was perfect, because like, a great songwriter, and I felt like I as a songwriter could be like honest around him, and like I had to say that to the band after a couple of different really good auditions happened with some really good drummers, where I was like, he's brilliant, but I don't think I could be myself all the time. I don't think I could be real in front of him, or I don't feel like I could be vulnerable in front of him. Whereas with James, I feel like I can be and was and have been, which is really important. Like I think that's with bands, great bands who have been, with great seminal lineups. That's what's happened is they've had like a mechanism that's worked really well across all of them, and that's why the songwriting process I'm completely open to everybody putting into that, because I don't have the ego for a second to think that I can just write one thing and that's how it's going to be, whether you like it or not. Sometimes it can feel like that about something, but I know nearly every time a year later I've looked back and went, I could have probably been better had somebody else done something. Do you know what I mean? Like
Sure.
definitely, like I'm not dumb, So yeah, it's a really important thing for me to have like a band that collaborates. I think it's whenever I'm producing bands as well, it's the same story. I can tell immediately when I go to see them rehearse who's the leader and who's being told what to do. And when you get bands that you can't tell and it feels like they're all part of a thing, that's sometimes really exciting. And sometimes, most of the time, they make better music for it. I think they're at least closer as a unit. They're
I agree. Yeah.
whether it's tightness in musically or just tightness between the songs, all of which sells the music anyway. So
Yeah. James, I have to ask you a question though. So, I think one of the funniest pranks a drummer can do is to very intently listen to what the other songwriters and the other collaborators want, and then just kind of like nod like you're getting it all, and then just play the same beat.
That happens.
he has done it.
I do that every day.
I was just about to ask.
Do you know that fucking thing the drummers do where they do like it's not in time, it's like
yes.
and it's like fucking whiplash or something.
It's on purpose.
He did it last night.
Yeah, there's one, it must have been, I don't know, a couple of weeks or a month ago, and I was fucking about in between songs while the rest of them were probably talking about something important, and I was playing something, and Johnny kind of perked up. He was like, "You're playing that like a fucking wanky drummer, like you're playing that like you want other drummers to be impressed." And I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Fucking play it hard and play it like faster." And I was like, all right. And I think I took a wee voice recording of it so I wouldn't forget it. And I remember sending it into the group right afterwards.
It is fucking awesome.
It is so cool.
But it was shit. Well, it wasn't shit. It was playing. There's an old saying that I was told years ago. I said all the time. I repeat it constantly. It is, don't play for musicians because musicians don't pay in, right?
Right.
And it's so true. Like, so as a producer, I think about it. I think you're not playing for musicians, right? Drummers who play for other drummers annoy the fuck out of me because the one musician who will definitely not pay in is the fucking drummer, right? So when he's playing,
I'm with the band.
He came up with this fucking thing, and it was so great. But I was going to take the MIDI in your brain of what that is and just command A and hit the velocity to the fucking top, right? And then all of a sudden it became cool to listen to as opposed to just like a jazz thing. And it was fucking great. And that even that voice clip, we're absolutely using the clip in a song. Yeah. Like it's so good sounding,
It just sounds beautiful. So, sounds like Sleigh Bells' first record or something where it's everything just
cranked and squished and square.
Awesome.
Fucking brilliant.
Album 3.
Yeah, I think.
Really?
Oh well, no,
This
sorry,
is 2?
3. Yeah.
James, can we talk a little bit about actually your involvement with the band? Just how it kind of came about and how you're doing things, I guess.
Yeah, so actually, it was kind of like, I love this story because I was off work. I was like sick for quite a while, and I had a practice space over in Blackstaff Mill, which is kind of like out west, Belfast. And I kind of got into like a routine where I wasn't in work at the time and I didn't want to go crazy at the house. So I would head out to the room, and I was writing songs and I could play drums loud and I could record drums and I could do whatever the fuck I wanted pretty much during the day. And I remember one time it was like, it must have been like kind of like, I don't know, autumn or winter, early winter, but it was like sunny. It was kind of like a day like today in Belfast. It was kind of sunny, freezing. And I walked out and there's a girl with green hair just sitting there. And I was like, oh, she looks cool. Who's that? And I started chatting to her, and like I don't know, she was smoking a joint, and I was like, oh, that's so fucking cool. I wish I could smoke a joint and not have to drive home.
They're gonna go, that's illegal.
Yeah, please can I borrow some?
I hope that's CBD.
And yeah, we just got chatting, and she was like, what are you doing? I was like, oh, I'm just up recording drums or whatever. And she was like, oh, cool, I play in a band. I was like, do you? She was like, I play in a band called Wynona Bleach. And I was like, oh, yeah, I've definitely heard the name. And then I was like, did you play in another band? She was like, R51. Yeah. And I was like, oh, yeah, I kept seeing your poster at the time about you guys going to Russia. That's so cool. And we got talking about that and all the rest of it. And then, I don't know, it must have been, I kept seeing her like every time I go up, because Mel has a studio like making ceramic, like jewelry and stuff. And I remember going home and like playing Wynona Bleach in the car and being like, holy shit. And a couple of weeks later, you were out of the black box for some gig, and I ran into Mel and I was like, oh, is Jonny here? Can you introduce him to me? And you were fucking steaming.
I actually don't remember this.
Well, I was also fucking steaming, so I don't really remember.
James could just be making shit up now. You just have to be like, I guess.
And we got chatting, and I remember, like, I don't know, I must have come hung out at the studio or like bumped into a couple more times or something, and we just started like actually just being mates. And I remember so clearly driving my dad into work one day, and I think my dad loves Cherry Dream, which is off the Sugar EP. It is like one of his favorite songs, if not his favorite song of all time. And I remember driving into work and him just being like, fuck. And I used to say, like, because it's so fucking dynamic and so quiet at the start, and then it fucking comes in halfway through, I'd have to be like, Dad, this is the bit where it's going to get loud, because I didn't want him to have a fucking heart attack or something. And I always used to jump no matter what. And he was like, God, Wynona Bleach are fucking great. And I was like, that's the kind of band I want to play for. And like, we just used to like hang out more and more. I remember like one Christmas Eve where we were all doing like karaoke at the club.
Yeah.
And we were all steaming and like,
yeah, I just became really good friends.
Just became really good friends really quickly.
But at the time, James was playing in another band that were friends of ours, and we were on tour with them. So we became even more pals on the tour, because we were the support band. And then at some point, whenever we were looking for a drummer, I just didn't want to like boil him with, here's another band that needs you. And also, we're also really busy. And
we're also really good mates with Virgins.
Yeah, well. And we didn't want to like fuck that up with anybody. So we never, so when we were doing the auditions, it was like everybody's first preference was James, but we just didn't, we felt like at the very least we had to give everybody who really wanted to try it a fair crack. And just in case it became simpler in life and James didn't have to, either try to do Virgins and Wynona Bleach at the same time, which probably couldn't be possible because of the amount of shit that Wynona Bleach do alone, let alone Virgin stuff, which is ramping up even more. Yeah. So it was just like, there's only so much time in the day and I didn't want to add to that. But then eventually we auditioned all those drummers, and it was like every single one of them, some of them were brilliant, but as days went by, we were just like, fuck. And then we forgot that our manager had asked us to do this charity single, like, this was maybe July, and then she'd asked us to do it in January, which was like a charity thing where we had to cover a Cure song. And we were like, yeah, we'll do that. Yeah. And then, of course, we kicked it so far down the field that it became July, and it was like the deadline was a few days later. So we were still mid auditioning drummers, and we were like, we have to do something here. And then everybody in the room was just like, should we just see if James will come in and do this cover with us? And then he came in, and it was fucking awesome. It was such a great session. And the single's great. Like it's out there. It's we covered Why Can't I Be You, and it's out there, I think, on the charities Bandcamp. We didn't ever release it ourselves, just released by them. But it's so good, and you can tell the energy in the room. Like, it's exciting because it's like everybody's, the respectometer among everybody for each other was
I was
high.
Shitting my pants, like, I was probably shitting my pants.
And then
I made onto the record.
But I was also like, holy shit,
let's do this.
This is a Wynona Bleach practice.
So it came out really well. And then obviously then everybody afterwards just like, should we just fucking have him join or ask him if he'll do it? And I just was like, it's gonna be so melty for him. And eventually it sort of worked out that because James was in Virgins, we love Michael and everything, and but Michael, it's his project, and at some stage I think it became like because James was writing a lot as well, it was a bit of an outlet to be able to join Wynona Bleach too, because it was like another collaborative project where he could write. And Michael, of course, was so pragmatic and so great. he was really cool about it. He was just like, yeah, I think it's the right thing. He actually uses the term, it's coalesced really well in his eyes, because he's come to see us play since, and like we love him a lot. Like, he's a bro, and he's come to see us since, and he would tell us if it was shit, you know. And
He'd be the first person.
absolutely, and I think he really gets it. Like in the 4-piece with James being the, you know, it's like it makes total sense, you know. So yeah, that's the story.
That's the story, and now we're all best.
Yeah,
best
it's
buddies.
great. Like it's such a great lineup. It's so great.
I'll try and take about too much more of your time. I just want to ask if just a couple more questions before we just get onto the single. I was going to ask actually the dynamics of the band, as you were kind of alluding to earlier. I mean, you know, it's mixing gaze with melody, which I guess, like My Bloody Valentine was very melodic too. It was just kind of mixed down low, but I mean the melody was there. But I mean, obviously, um, you know, actually, The Cure is a good example. I mean, I kind of consider them sort of proto-gays in a way.
Yeah.
I mean, they're like Pornography and Disintegration. I mean, very gazy records.
Yeah.
So it's just I was wondering. I mean, like obviously the dynamics of the band in terms of actually making sure that each member kind of I guess kind of like is heard through the sound. Is that something that like when it comes to producing the music? How do you kind of make considerations for where everyone should be in the mix? And then later, when you bring it to Andy and Avril, I assume, because it seems like a very collaborative partnership, that they too also have those considerations in mind when it comes to the actual mastering of the piece.
Yeah, I mean, this record, there's a whole lot more. Um, I guess there's a whole lot more focus on each thing, rather than like previous Wynona Bleach for me was what you said, like mixing a lot of gaze with melody and with sort of alt rock stuff. But
Yeah.
at this point, I think I'm kind of me as a producer and, you know, one of the 4 songwriters of the band. I'm not past the gaze part, but I think we've kind of not moved beyond it either. It's just like it's taking even less of a priority. Like I don't know what it is or how to describe it, but I know that like I'm much less interested in, well, we even said that this phrase, which was more guitar-y with less guitars,
Right.
was kind of the step that we decided to take on this record. So most of the new stuff is more focused, I think, and that works well with working with Andy, because he comes from that world of taking really in his eyes too much shit going on and finding focus in it, and he's really good at it. Like it's such an incredible talent he has at finding focus in density. And it's kind of shocking from my end, because I'll maybe send him what I think is what it's going to be, and every time he sends it, it's a complete shock what he's focused in on, like what he's made be the poke out. And actually that goes right back to Drag, which is the first track off Moonsoak, because it was he that was the one that managed to be the guy that made sense of it. Most people, we had mixes done by so many people. There was a person who had done mixes for Duran Duran. There was one of the guys who does stuff for U2. There was so many people who had attempted to mix it, all good mixes. But it was Andy who managed to find focus in the chaos of it really well. And what he made focus, it was instantly just mind blowing to everybody. It shocked me when I first listened to it, because I had come from layering all these fucking guitars and blah, 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 and then he had made it all of a sudden listenable. If you get me, like I
Sure,
understood
sure.
that, even though I was like, "Where's my fucking, you know, third harmony
It's good,
thing
but
that
I
I
don't
spent
like
ages on?"
it.
Yeah, but he just was so. Yeah, this record is definitely there. There's a bit more priority on making room in the mix for everything to work better,
Yeah.
or at least for everything to have its own focus. It's actually really obvious in that latest track, Tangerine, because I thought releasing that was going to be kind of a shock to some people, because it has such space in it compared to what we're used to doing. Like most of the things we've done in the past have been walled out, up, you know, fuzzed out. But you can only do that for so long before you as an artist don't feel like you're pushing any kind of boundary.
Right.
And there's no real point in doing anything the same every single fucking time and expecting it to be different, you know, or expecting a different result. So this was like an exercise in more guitar with less guitars.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
I think
think
me and Carl especially are such like play for the song kind of musicians. You are too, obviously,
Mhm.
but like from a songwriter perspective, if you bring a riff or like a melody, you're huge into melody.
Mhm.
And if you bring something like that to us, me and Carl will try and like play to that.
Yeah.
And not like a lot of bands will be like, I am the drummer and I'm going to play a drum part that is so fucking cool that other drummers are gonna fucking blow their load when they listen to this. But like, yeah, me and Carl, especially when we get it, it's way more impactful to like lend to the song than it is to like
Yeah.
take it over, you
No,
know.
I totally agree. Like you definitely don't feel like you're like I've been in bands with some drummers that you feel like the drummer is only playing for himself, or
Right.
with bass players that are only playing for themselves. And I work with bands, I see it all the time. It's like they're not actually here for this band, they're here for themselves. They're playing to get their own career off the ground. They don't give a fuck.
Mhm.
Whereas when you get like Carl and James together, what's also happened in this new current iteration is with Aaron's departure, which I think when he did it was just before we started working on the album, and it was at the time it was like a huge shock and well, we sort of known for a while that he was talking about moving on with life and doing different stuff, but when he did it, it was like, how are we going to make this record? But actually it was almost this great new challenge. But what I think is really cool is Carl has totally stepped up into this. He's let's put it this
He
way.
plays more than any of
He
them.
plays he has the hardest job in the band. All of a
Yeah.
sudden he went from being a really solid bass player who was playing really great parts that he had written to a guy who now basically is doing three jobs, because what's happened is, to maintain the density of the band's live sound, which we were always really proud of, how like not necessarily how loud we were, but how like fucking full on it seemed. Like it's got a weight to it. And
Yep.
without Aaron's guitar parts, it was kind of scary. How are we going to do this or whatever? And what we do is basically Carl has a really ingenious pedal board setup that means he's split among a guitar amp and a bass amp, and he's playing guitar parts. And there's parts of the set where he's playing his bass, but actually the bass part is off and he's octaved up and he's doing guitar parts. There's guitar solo-y sections which are him. And now with the fact that everybody has decided, well, let's all try singing as well. There's now the four of us singing, and so Carl is learning, on the fly, things that he's never had to do in this band since forever, because he's always focused on being like a bass player, and now it's great. Like it's really like you're revisiting older songs, which we have, is really fun, because you're like, fuck, actually, Carl, you're gonna have to do this, and I'm gonna have to do that, and oh, I'm gonna have to play all the way through like I'm Aaron instead of what I used to do, and you're gonna have to do my bit. So yeah, the focus has come from that, I think, and like the how we're balancing it has come from that. And the tracking sessions were designed to be like that. When we were recording the album, Carl's parts were done like they're done live. He went through both amps, played the pedal board like he's playing his bass. He did it a specific way. And then when we were mixing it with Andy, he was like, I am using that. It would be very easy for me to go and just double guitar parts up, which I've done millions and millions and millions of times in my life. And it'd be very easy for me to go and just do the other guitar that Carl does. But no, the new sound is Carl's octaved up crazy bass sound
kind
on
of
one
like
side.
latency that comes out
Yeah,
of it,
the sort of
the weird
character that it has is really cool, and I don't think I've ever heard it done that way, as well as a guitarist on the other side, me.
Yeah.
So it's been really cool, and I think we've made so far, from what we have of the record, because there's still some of it to be finished up and mixed, it still feels like we've made something really unique. And it may be a shock to some people who really like what we've done before, and it may be actually a relief to people who don't like what we've done before, and maybe we're doing something better for them. Equally, it just feels like we've made a new step, and as James has said for ages, he thinks it's just the start of this process, because the third album will be the real seminal one. So
because we're really just figuring everything out at the minute.
It's
like
new.
that. Those how long were you tracking for? Like 2 or 3 weeks?
Yeah,
those 2 or 3 weeks of tracking every day was like oh shit.
We
didn't even fucking finish writing songs till like after the album.
Yeah.
And that brings me back to there's a track called Gonk that we wrote after the album. And that was, I think it was purely like Carl and me and you just messing about, and we're like, oh, that's something. But to bring it back to Carl's new setup and his new role in the band, we were playing Gaze Fest in August last year, and we opened with Gonk, which is a big like kind of like bass heavy thing. And I remember just looking past Carl into the crowd, and there was a couple of kids, and it got to the part, and they went, "How the fuck are they doing that?" And they were looking around, and then the end of it is very like typo negative.
Typo negative.
It is so typo negative. And we end it, and I remember there was just like a couple of seconds, a perfect comedic length of time where nothing happened, and someone just went, "Fuck." And I was like, "Yeah, we got that." That was fucking brilliant. That was so good. I loved that.
I guess I'll wrap up by speaking about Tangerine. Here's my little short review of it. The best song of the summer to be released in January.
Yeah.
That's what my sister said.
No way,
That's
did
what my
you?
sister said.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Great minds.
Do you know, I think
really-
I thought it was a summer song originally as well, but now it was just in the panic of trying to put out a new single before going to South by. It was just like, well, this one's done. Let's just get it out. So probably should have been held back this summer. Maybe we'll get the video done by summer.
Yeah, well, this summer
yeah, if you can talk about this, because this is the third single, I believe, to be released off your upcoming album. It follows Swim in the Bay, and I Deserve That. Yeah, I mean, I think, would I be correct in saying that this album leans more kind of towards like alt pop, or not necessarily like portraying, as you said, the previous sound, but just kind of like incorporating a new element, a new dimension? Is that a fair assessment, I guess, of what to expect?
Absolutely. Yeah, totally. It's more alt pop. Somebody called us, David Roy in the Irish News called us crunchy bubble grunge. And then I think when he first said that, I was like, that is totally what we either are or should be. So
Yeah.
there's definitely some bubble grunge in that. Like it's poppy and it's floaty, but it's not like shoegazy as much as it used to be, for all the reasons we've talked about today. Like it's just, it makes no sense to like stick around on that category that we didn't really always even feel like we were in properly anyway, because there's so many bands that can do shoegaze better and do it right. And I never was really interested in being in one of those bands, so progressing beyond that into alt pop is kind of what it's more become. Like it's naturally done that. It wasn't from any kind of, we need to do something commercial. It just sort of feels like that's what the fun thing is.
Your big push is always just like hook
and
like
melody, and
you are a self like proclaimed like basic bitch.
I am a basic bitch. And and shoegaze is great and all, but when you're a basic bitch like me, it only goes so far.
Yeah.
You can listen to it. I really like it. I can do a whole shoegaze album, and then I might be okay for a couple of weeks.
You need some Addison Rae.
I think literally in my Spotify on the
just saw
screen,
that.
he's just seen that I was listening to Addison Rae before you come in. But yeah, like I think I am absolutely basic, and I think it's a good thing and it should be celebrated. It's fine to be basic. And so I really wanted the top lines to be strong, and the alt pop thing, you're absolutely right. I think that's the most fair like way to put it. And I guess when you hear the whole record, you can tell me if it's otherwise, but there's definitely some rock and roll in it, and a little bit more guitar heaviness to it. And there's some stuff that might be considered a bit nuts.
Yeah.
For considering that we're saying alt pop, there's some stuff
there's also like
there's blast beats occasionally.
Yeah, oh yeah, that's
yeah.
But there's also dream pop elements.
There's dream pop.
One track that is super. It's kind of it reminds me more of old Wynona Bleach.
Yeah, that's Face. You have it.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a couple of tracks that are like, if you really liked what I liked about the band's previous sound, it's there too. That. But for the most part, you're absolutely right. It's all pop, and it's bubble grungy stuff.
Yeah, sophistipop.
Sophistipop is one of my friends. When I played him the demo of Tangerine, he was like, "It's sophistipop." I was like, I like that. Yeah. I don't know if people agree, but I like it.
I love the adjectives people kind of come up with to try and describe what they're hearing. I find it like really, I think it's great prose.
Yeah. But no, it's good. I'm excited like for how people will react to it in the best possible way.
Yeah, it'll be good. I'm really excited for people to hear it genuinely.
I want to first, before we leave, I want to plug a gig you have coming up in Belfast, 16th, the Union Bar.
Yeah.
This be, I guess, your last show before you jet off to the States. Actually, when you're in the US, is it just going to be South by Southwest, or do you plan on doing shows around it? Or
It's just South by Southwest. Wink, wink.
okay.
But yes, if you could make that not yes. We're just doing South by Southwest. Yeah, we're just
Okay.
doing the official showcase at South by Southwest, and then we're having a wee bit of a holiday to see some friends, and then we're coming home.
Perfect. But when the album kind of comes out, I mean, are you planning any shows or tours around that?
Yeah, so I think we're have yet to decide on the release date of the record, and that's what's dictating the rest of it. So we really want to try and punch on into Europe a little bit, because we always do end up posting records to Germany and France, and we've never gone over really properly and give it a good shot. And we've always been up and down the UK and up and down Ireland, and so I think we're trying to make it line up with like touring season where it's like it might work out better for us. So we're talking maybe closer to the end of the year. And we'll try to go down into France and maybe Belgium and into Germany and back again. It's all very up in the air, but it's only up in the air because we can't commit on a date of the album yet, for various reasons. But when we do get it nailed down, I think that will be the plan. The show on the 16th is like, for a lot of people who I know in Belfast, it might be their first time seeing us as a 4-piece too. And it's also a bit of a fundraiser for us, because obviously doing South by is not cheap. So
Right.
it's kind of a big deal show for us, because it's a small venue and it's going to be sweaty and close together. And we just really want to like give ourselves the best possible spring in our step onward to the US, and then South by is going to kind of be like a shop us around thing, and hopefully build up some new friends to help with the release of the record and moving on into hopefully Europe and a little bit more further afield for us, so that's the plan.
I'm about to ask the worst question in music journalism. No one's gonna give a shit about this except me, but it's just something I'm interested in. When you're traveling to Texas for the show, are you transporting your gear, or are you playing rented equipment?
So the way South by operate it, they sort of instruct you to use their backline as much as possible on their stages. So you get these things, obviously day parties that are run where those stages will all have backline, and of course Austin is completely fucking jammed full of musicians that are all renting gear. So you have a hard time renting if you wanted to rent things that you like. So what we did before and what we're doing again, is we're just flying with guitars and pedals and then praying. So like most of the amps you just get given a clean setup. So they give you a Fender Twin, or they'll give you a hot rod or something that kind of works. We did do one in 2023 when we went. We did a show on the rooftop of an Irish bar on Paddy's Day, and the guy who ran it was a beautiful man. He was great, but he was like, "Guys, I'm really sorry in advance. I could not get a backline to save my life, because it was the second stage or the first one of the two stages he was running." He's like, "So the backline isn't great. I'm really sorry." And we went up, and my amp was like a like a little practice amp, like a little like custom
Line 6.
50-watt thing. Yeah,
Like a spider.
Yeah, it was like a spider. It basically was. Yeah. And then Aaron, he had a Vox AC15, but it was 212, but one of the speakers was not in it. There was just
Okay.
one speaker in it, I think,
Right.
if I remember right. So it ended up, it was pretty diabolical, but you know what? You kind of get used to just finessing that. That's
Yeah.
why like you spend a wee bit of time just making sure you've got a pedal board that works everywhere, and then you just have to just
Great.
finesse the show as best you can and just work your way through it. And some shows are bad in terms of guitar tone, but at least if you put on a good show, I don't think 90% of people give a total shit, because they know what it's like. It's South by, it's just nuts.
Yeah.
The big win this year was we were shitting it a bit, because when we're flying, obviously there's only 4 of us in the band now, so there's one less person that can check an item in. So we had a big win where we got one of those cool fucking coffin cases where 2 guitars go in. Have you seen
Okay.
these? Yeah, I was really pleased about that. We managed to get one of those. So now it's like, yeah, we're together. We've got it. We've got 4 check-in items, and that's pedals, 2 guitars, some drum stuff, and then Mel's clothes, and we're good.
See, I'd be shitting, man. I'd be like, fuck, what if it gets lost in transit or something? That'd be my fear. Like,
Apple
traveling with
AirTags.
equipment. Yeah,
We have them
okay.
inside. There's legit inside the guitars. Yeah.
Yeah, sure, but if you get to the location, it's like, well, I know where it is. It's not
No,
here.
I just can't have it. Yeah. Do you know what, man? I have flown. We've done when we did Russia, and we've flown all over the place. We used to fly into fucking gigs in England sometimes,
Mhm.
and I've flown dozens and dozens and dozens of times with guitars, and I don't think I've ever had an issue like that. As long as it's tagged right and you've got your shit together and you check in at the right time and you're only doing one flight to a place and not connecting, that's the bollocks. Connecting is where you lose stuff.
Sure.
If you're smart with it, and if they're making you do a connecting flight, you purposely book it yourself and you stop over in that time, that sort of stuff. You be smart with it, and I don't think I've ever had an issue. So fingers crossed, touch wood, all the rest of it stays that way. But yeah.
I don't know. I just had the mental image of someone coming into like an airport with like one of them big like Ampeg like stacks and just being like, can this be carry on?
Yeah.
I don't want to pay extra for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think James, one final thing I'll just say is if how would you feel if you were like watching the act before you and the drummer just completely fucks up the kit?
I've lived that.
It's happened. My God, his actual kit.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we did a fucking gig somewhere. We'll not drop the name because I can't remember the name.
I remember exactly.
All right, don't say that.
I'm not gonna say it.
But we were somewhere in England, somewhere we were like touring, and it was some venue, and it was one of the ones where we're the headliner, and we obviously.
I just reskinned my kit. I was like, I'll fucking.
And this band,
and I swear to God,
it was like he was poking
them. And I went up afterwards, and I was like, "What has he done?" Like, and they're still.
They are awful looking, but it was. We'd done like 5 shows to that point in the tour, and then nobody had fucked anything up, so I couldn't get any worse, and then this was the opening band, so like it wasn't even the main support, it was the first band that totally fucked them.
I can't believe you brought that up.
That's so
I'm sorry, I didn't know I was like cutting into
he still uses that kit as his tour one because it's got the Wynona Bleach head on the front of it, and he hasn't had it out of the cases since. He's got this other kit in the room because he hasn't looked at it, and then he's gonna have to for this show next week.
I might get the hair. Apparently, if you get a hairdryer, you can kind of like melt them back into place.
Yeah,
I just don't have a hairdryer in the practice space yet. That's when we hit the big time.
Can't wait.
Well, perfect. Thanks very much for your time, guys. I'm
sorry
for
for
re-traumatizing you, James.
But I'm so fucking sorry about
you wouldn't get that with a Mock Savage. You don't get that with Mock Savage.
Yeah, no, James was there on time. Yeah. He was. Yeah. Also, let's plug Muck Savage too. Listen to Muck Savage. Actually, while I have you, sorry, Johnny, but does Muck Savage have anything coming up soon?
Yes, we've got a gig on the 22nd of February. In Ulster Sports Club, that is with Dullahan and Broncos, and then we're playing Mandela Hall for Levels on the 27th, and there might be a single coming out before then.
That's sick. Is actually, could I ask about that? Because I remember hearing years ago about Mandela Hall closing. Is it the same space or is it new?
No, new space.
Yeah, it's completely rebuilt.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Rebuilt. It's like it used to be. It used to be awesome. It used to be like the venue for Belfast. It's
it's a little bit more commercial, a little bit more corporate looking, but I mean it's still a big room in it, and it's but it before it was a little bit more of a sort of divey theater vibe,
literally underground,
but it still was really good sounding room, and I seen a lot of amazing acts in it, so I guess it's also
that's where I went to my first ever show. Like was
my favorite gig of all time was in there.
What was it?
Deaf Heaven.
Yeah.
There was only 4 of us there, and the other people that were there were "And So I Watch You From Afar," watching them,
and it was watching them from afar.
Yeah. They were actually
that's like that story when the Sex Pistols played the Free Trade Hall. Like everyone there supposedly became members of like the punk bands and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's right. I remember that.
So much mythologizing. I never know how many of these like stories are actually true.
But I remember hearing that story before as well. Yeah.
Because there's a story about like when the Ramones first played the Roundhouse in London, it was their first gig, and people are like, "Oh yeah," and members of the Clash were there, and they started a band, and all. And people are like, "They were already going. They were playing a gig down the road at that point." Like people actually went to the chronology.
Rock and roll lore. Yeah.
Well,
actually, Johnny, sorry.
Bands that come out of the 16th of February. Let me tell you that.
Actually, Johnny, I'm sorry. I have one final question. I promise I'll let you go. But I was talking about with you, James, about this last time we spoke, but something I've been noticing with some acts I've been talking to from Belfast, that kind of a lot of the kind of bigger acts that would have been playing places like Ulster Hall or Telegraph Building or SSE, a lot of them are kind of like now skipping Belfast, but like when they come to Ireland, they tend to just do Dublin dates now. But
Mm.
what I've been noticing is that like a lot more the kind of smaller acts that would be playing places like Mandela or would be playing places like Ulster Sports Club or kind of the more kind of like or Limelight or play venues like that. A lot of those seem to be kind of like including Belfast a lot more now. Do you find well, from your own perspective, just like as a music fan living in the city, I mean, how do you find the kind of acts that are coming through to town now different?
So, like, I can actually answer it from a slightly different perspective than that, only because when I was trying to make a living as trying to make my start as a record producer, that the only other job I could really ever do okay was working as a runner for the bigger venues up here. And I could sort of see the infrastructure in the background around why bands seem to be selective about whether they do both cities or whether they just do the one.
Yeah,
Quite a lot of the time, you'll find the reason why a lot of bands won't do Belfast isn't necessarily from like a size of the city thing or size of the venue. It quite more often than not, it's purely expense, because if they're a really big band doing the really big venues, it's like another couple of days for what in the global scale is basically the same radius as going from St. Louis to Chicago. They
right.
just see it as, well, we'll just fucking go to Dublin then, and if they like us enough and come down 2 hours, it's only 2 hours. But to us, that's
Yeah,
like it's a whole other fucking like length of an island to nearly go to. Whereas, yeah, so like infrastructure wise, it's also just like a lot of fucking money. A lot of bands will come here. That's why there's a lot of bands that get good supports. Like we got to do the support for Alice in Chains, and
yeah,
the reason for that, without going down a whole topic of why we got picked, we were picked by Jerry. It wasn't actually a nepotism thing, really. It was sort of accidental that one of our friends knew Jerry, and then we got asked by Jerry Cantrell to do the gig. It was nothing more than, there's no buy-ons, there's nothing. But the reason for it was because I think it was a Black Label Society, or I can't remember what band was doing the tour with them. They just couldn't afford to do Ireland,
oh
because the
really?
cost of the ferry and the
Yeah.
cost of the accommodation and the cost of everything was like, they just couldn't do it. So
Mm.
quite a lot of bands who are huge can afford to do Ireland because they really want to do it, but the supports that are on the tour with them can't afford to do it, because if you think about it, it's like 600-700 quid just for a van on the boat
Right.
before you've got to put food in everybody's mouths and then put them somewhere. So we support bands don't ever come over. So we ended up getting the 2 dates in Ireland with them, because a big massive band with loads of money couldn't be ours or couldn't afford, you know.
Well
So
then,
yeah, the
what?
quality of the bands that are coming through,
Sorry.
it just depends. And like I think Belfast does get pretty good. Like it does get a good amount of relatively big enough artists that could be ours doing it. But I can see why an artist wouldn't at the same time, if
Yeah.
they're coming from, they're looking at Dublin, and it's a larger city, and to them, the radius of going all the way up to Belfast
Right.
is only 2 hours. Fuck them, make them come from Belfast then.
No, because I remember, like, again, going back to kind of like when I was a teenager, it was like every time an act came to Ireland, it was always Belfast, Dublin. And what I thought was really interesting was you could kind of see the similarities in the venues between the two cities. So, for example, if a band was playing like the Olympia in Dublin, they'd be playing Ulster Hall. If they were playing the Academy in Dublin, they were playing Mandela,
Yeah,
things like that. Whelan's, they'd be playing the Empire. You could kind of get a semblance of like the similarities between the
yeah,
venues in the two
yeah,
cities. I always found that really interesting. Then, like, it just seemed like the tap stopped. I think it was like a post-pandemic thing. I don't know, but
yeah. It might be.
do you think then for like smaller artists who come to Ireland, they have to kind of like play more cities in order to kind of accrue the cost
Yeah,
spent is that way? I
it's
don't
got to
know.
be. The smaller you are, yeah, the more you're gonna do, just to try
Yeah.
and get more T-shirts sold. I mean, really, you know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
to get more, if you're, it sort of makes more sense for a band to try and do smaller rooms in multiple places rather than one big show, and hope that you get that
Yeah.
radius happening. I guess. I'm no
Yeah.
expert, but that's what it feels like. But yeah, yeah, I still see like my favorite bands tend to also that I see come through tend to do Belfast and Dublin. I don't know what you think about it, but it seems to be that mid-level and smaller, it's both cities. Any bigger than that, you're right, it's one or the other.
Yeah. I also just think the bands that I want to see now, like sometimes I just could not be asked going to an arena show.
Yeah,
I just couldn't. I mean, obviously I'm going to My Bloody Valentine because of course I'm going, but and I wanted to go to the Pumpkins and stuff, but like a lot of the bands I want to see aren't filling arenas, and I have no real inclination to go unless it's a proper, like, I don't know, occasion, if you know what I mean. So it's not, it absolutely bothered me as a teenager because I definitely started noticing it the older I got.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's probably just more expensive to stay. I mean, it's, of course it's more expensive to stay in Dublin now, and if it's 3 times the price that it was, I don't know, 15 years ago, then it's worth playing one show in Dublin and hoping that people come from Belfast. You know? Like it's just more, everything's more expensive, and whereas where it was probably cheaper in the past, like it's more expensive now. It makes sense in that aspect. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, next time we talk, we're not going to say anything about music. We're just going to purely talk about economics and politics and how to fix the
my least
economic
favorite
stress.
subject. Brilliant. Looking forward to it.
No, it'd be a great podcast. It'll just I bet it'd be something weird shit like that would just do really well. Yeah,
I
every
think
now
so.
and again,
Actually, it would be really good fun to actually have like musicians not talk about music podcast. Yeah. I'd try to not, and anytime they do, you take a shot or something, or the other way around. I don't know.
They're just like interviewing, like the first thing you're doing is like, so what do you think of the Louisiana Purchase? Like,
but those, those fucking dog collar things on them, and anytime anybody mentions anything in music, they get zapped.
Stanford Prison Experiment.
I think my interview request would dry up very quickly. Actually, I'm sorry. I keep saying one last question, but new things just come to my mind. But you were kind of talking there about the sort of radius of doing gigs. I was actually just going to ask, when you did that Russian tour back in 2018, did that kind of give you a different perspective? Because obviously Ireland is, it's a relatively small country. I think we tend to kind of we tend to kind of put too much emphasis on how small it is. Like, compared to like the Netherlands or Belgium, we're actually bigger, but I think we have a perspective of it being smaller than perhaps it actually is. I don't know, but anyway, going to an actually undisputedly massive country like Russia, did that kind of give you a bigger perspective on traveling in a big country? Because I've talked to artists from Australia, for example, and I'm like, well, that's crazy. I mean, you're traveling like 8 hours, and for them that's like nothing. They don't care. But for me, like the idea of being on a train or on a plane for 8 hours just like kill me. Did playing kind of Russia kind of just geographically kind of expand your view in any way?
Fucking right, it did. So like basically, like I said, I mentioned it earlier that the routine on every day was you got up at about 9:30 or 10. You were woken up at about 9:30 or 10 by the tour manager Stanislav, who's one of the loveliest people I've ever met in my life. And then you're bundled into this van and you basically do 8 hours. And then you get to the venue and you load in and you eat and then you play the gig and then you sign some CDs and you sell some shit. And then you get drunk, and then you go to bed, and then you wake up, and you do that again, and you do that for 12 days in a row. That's quite literally the order of it. But one of the things that we used to do as like a pastime or sort of a novelty was we used to bet on how much bigger was the next city to Belfast. So because we didn't know what any of these places were. Like if you were to look at the poster, they're cities, because Russia's so enormous. And also because they're, even pre the war, they were still fairly insular, I guess. You think about America and how many of their cities are in movies, and everybody's heard of all these places. But in Russia, there's more and bigger cities that you've never heard of. So we used to get this thing going where you try to guess by how many times was the next city bigger than Belfast. And the smallest city that we had played was a city called, I don't know if it was the smallest, but one of the smaller ones was called Ufa, which is just spelled UFA. And I'd never heard of Ufa. And it was just a city that existed and that we were driving to that day. And we all went, well, how fucking much bigger could it be? Belfast population is only something stupid, like 500,000 or something like that. So we looked it up, and I think it was like 4 million in this one city. You know what I mean? Or something fucked up, right? I don't know what actually it is. I'm probably over exaggerating it. And just while we're on it, let's look it up. UFA, Russia, right? Population. Let's see. Where are we? Population 1.6 million.
Yeah.
1.1 million. Twice the size of Belfast, right? And now a lot of these cities were like 2 million, 3 million. And we're going, fuck me, I've never heard of any of them. And that was a massive eye opener. It was like these are places you don't know exist that are way bigger than you can ever even imagine. And you think Belfast is on the map. You think people give a fuck, but you go around and you see. And then what was even more mad was turning up to these places and then like kids singing back the song lyrics, in like a Russian accent. It was really strange,
Yeah.
But it was very eye-opening. So yes, absolutely. I think doing that kind of travel every day and then still looking on a map and seeing what you've done. We went to Siberia essentially, like we were at the Kazakhstan border and back on that run.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you get back and you've done it and you look back and you go, Jesus Christ, I was in Asia, that was nuts, you do gain a totally different perspective on the world. And anybody I know who's well traveled or done that, they're a little bit more patient with people and they're a little bit more welcoming and a bit more accommodating on people just being different. And they're a little less extreme either way in their politics. They're almost more actually liberal, as in center, because they've seen. And I feel like I have, it was a nice perspective and it was a bit eye-opening and it was a lot of learning and a lot of fun and a lot of friends were made too, and still try to keep in touch with some of them. It's hard to because they're Instagram's banned still over there and whatever, but you still see the odd like Russian name come up and liking something that you posted and you go, oh fuck, that's that guy that I signed a CD for or something, and he gave me a shot of vodka.
You should have capitalized. You should have made an official Wynona Bleach VK account.
We did. Well, we see what we did. Well, our tour manager did for us because he said that there was music already there, so he did. And then he said, look, do you want me to manage it, because otherwise how you going to spell, we had no real data there. We could get data, but it was kind of only mostly we were relying on hotel Wi-Fi throughout the whole trip. So he was like, yeah, I'll do the posting. So actually we did have an official page, and then he would post like videos of us, like halfway through that day we would stop for lunch and he'd do a video of us where we would say we're playing in such and such tonight and whatever, and then he would do the translation below and then post it to our VK as if it was us posting it, so it still exists there, I think. And then whenever we changed to Wynona Bleach, I sent him an email. I was like, if you fancy it, would you mind changing the name? And I think he did. He sent me an email back saying he'd done it, and he said someone else had already uploaded Moonsoak to it. I was like, yeah, okay, dead on, understood. So
when I write up these articles, at the end of the articles, I tend to put the social media links for the acts I'm talking about. Do you want me to put the VK link?
Find it if it's there. If I find it, do it. I haven't looked in years, man, so it may be there, it may not be. But if you find that shit, put it on for sure.
I go full detective mode.
Because you can access it easily here. It's just when I made an account for myself on it to try to do it,
Yeah.
And then when I log in, the only friends I have are all the Russian people I met there. So I understand nothing and there's no translate. So it's a fucking Russian website, and I'm just like, okay. And you maybe, if you copy paste some shit into Google Translate, you can work out what just happened in the post. But it was lost on me pretty quickly. But yeah, it exists. And I'm sure, I think he wrote it as something like Wynona Bleach XR51 or something, so it still made sense to people or something. I don't know. So if you find it, post it. I'd love to see it. I might go looking for it after we finish here.
All right, perfect. Whoever gets it first wins.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Jonny. Thanks very much, James.
Thanks so much, man. I appreciate
it's nice seeing you again, man. By the way, I didn't know you were popping on, so it's nice.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, just element of surprise.
I believe you just walked in, saw me on the screen. So
Well, it's nice to chat to you, dude. I really appreciate it. Looking forward to seeing you again.
Yeah.
Thanks. Take care, guys.
Cheers. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to that episode of Post-Burnout.com interviews. We're an independent venture run by yours truly, and as I said at the beginning, liking, rating, subscribing and sharing really helps us out a lot. If you're feeling extra generous, we do have a PayPal donation link in the episode description, but don't feel obligated, of course. We've also begun releasing occasional exclusive episodes on Spotify, so subscribe there if you'd be interested in hearing those. Thanks again for listening, and see you next time.